Namaste everyone. In today's video, we're going to focus on Muni Patanjali's Yoga Sutra 2.45. Now in this particular Yoga Sutra, Muni Patanjali is helping us to understand the impact of Ishwar Pranidhan, which is the fifth niyama. So let's take a good look at the sutra and start understanding it a little bit further, step by step. So the sutra itself goes, Samadhi Siddhirishwara Pranidhanat. Alright, so now that we've heard the sutra, let's break it up word by word. The first word here is Samadhi, which is the eighth or the last step in the Ashtanga Yoga sequence. So we're going to understand that further in the explanation, but the first word is Samadhi. The second word is Siddhi. Now Siddhi, just like in the previous sutra, refers to a certain level of perfection or a certain kind of accomplishment really well done. So this is a Siddhi in usage in this sutra. And finally, of course, the third word is Ishwar Pranidhan itself, which refers to total surrender to your chosen form of divinity. So now what the sutra is trying to tell us is that when we have perfected Ishwar Pranidhan, we've really been able to surrender ourselves to the chosen form of divinity. What tends to happen is we find there to be a certain perfection in the samadhi. So when you go into the meditative practices and processes and you are moving towards samadhi, Ishwar Pranidhan helps to actually perfect that practice to reach samadhi and to really experience it in its entirety. So this is a little bit about what really happens with this usage of Ishwar Pranidhan in the practice. But let's also take a moment to go even deeper into the sutra and understand it even further. Alright, so as you noticed, Ishwar Pranidhan is appearing quite a few times in the second chapter. It first appeared in the explanation of Kriya Yoga, where it was given as a practical path towards being able to perform Kriya Yoga, and then it's also appearing in this section of the niyamas. So clearly Ishwar Pranidhan is a pretty important concept. Not only this, it also appeared in Sutra 1.23 in the first chapter, where it was given as a sort of solution to reducing the thought waves of the mind. But here's what a very unique thing is that's been noticed in these two sutras. In the second chapter, it's given as a practical path, but in the first chapter, it's given as an alternative to Abhyas and Vairagya. So in the first chapter, Muni Patanjali is explaining that if you want to reduce the thought waves in your mind, step number one or process one is Abhyas and Vairagya, and another option with that is Ishwar Pranidhan. So it seems like these are either an or, but in this chapter it becomes very clear that Ishwar Pranidhan is something that we need to align, we need to practice in order to go in the practical direction. So here he's not giving us the option, he's not saying, oh, do this or do that. He's saying, hey, this is in Kriya Yoga, this is also there in the niyamas, and it's something that is pretty important to be followed practically for a yoga sadhak who is serious about their journey or their practice. So we can see that Muni Patanjali sort of has given is behaving differently towards Ishwar Pranidhan in this chapter itself. Another very important reason that this surrender to the divine is an important element is because it creates emotion within us. It creates a certain amount of pleasantness. It helps us to surrender, which is a very beautiful quality to have. But on the other hand, if we don't have Ishwar Pranidhan, there is a tendency for us to become really emotionless or hard or egoistic, because if there is no sense of surrender, the ego rises even more. And so there's a chance that a yogi who chooses not to conduct Ishwar Pranidhan might become somebody who is completely, devoid of the emotion of surrender. He might become really full of himself or herself with the knowledge of yoga and then refuse to surrender to anybody, which is also not the best case scenario. Reason being that even though we're practicing yoga, we're all living in the modern world. We're interacting with other people, we have so much work to do, we have to conduct our lives. So we need a little bit of emotion and pleasantness and that quality of understanding and surrender to conduct our daily lives. And so this becomes a really important part of our yoga sadhana. It prevents us from just completely going into Abhyas Vairagya only and it also helps us to become better people along the journey. So this is one of the reasons why we have Ishwar Pranidhan as a very important part of the yogic sadhana and study. Now, at the same time, let's take a moment to remember what is Ishwar Pranidhan, which is essentially the surrender to a divine form that you have chosen. And I think this is really important because sometimes we tend to think that we are the end all and be all and that there's probably nothing above us, maybe there is no higher power and things like that. And to each their own, but I would like to say that it's important sometimes to recognize that there are a lot of things that are happening in and around us that aren't in our control. We don't have all the answers. And because we don't have all the answers, we can surrender, we can be a little humble and say, you know what, I don't know. And because I don't know, maybe a higher power knows better. And maybe I can surrender to that lack of understanding in me to maybe a higher power that understands more. Just similar to the collective conscience or the collective consciousness, and things that we can kind of use together to kind of move in that direction. So I think Ishwar Pranidhan is a fantastic way to remind ourselves of what is important along the yogic sadhana, and at the same time, we have to know that Ishwar Pranidhan, since it's a niyama, is also a very practical process. They are referring here to a type of puja or a type of reverence or service that we conduct, that we actually perform every single day at the same time to then feel Ishwar Pranidhan on a practical level. There are a lot of people within Indian families or Hindu families who actually still do havan and puja, very specific timings, very specific tithis throughout the day, and they take it very seriously. And through that act of continuously doing it, even if you didn't have surrender before, you keep doing it, it creates that emotion of surrender within you. And even vice versa, you might start with a lot of surrender, but then you may not be as disciplined, you may not be as consistent, but then over time that consistency picks up and you're able to do it every day. So it's important also to remember that this practice is supposed to be taken in a practical format. Of course, since this was written in a time when it was written in Patanjali's time, so we're talking of the Indian culture, we're talking of Hinduism. But of course, if you don't belong to the Hindu tradition or the Indian faith, it's completely okay to practice it in your own way, in whatever practical performance of prayer that you do. And I think that's the best part, to make space for each other, allow for differences, and allow for different ways of doing Ishwar Pranidhan. So this is what this sutra is all about. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you in one of our future videos, classes, or workshops. The links for all our work and our courses are in the description, so you can take a look at that. And we look forward now to seeing you very soon in the next one. Namaste.